Hi, everyone. This is Leela Harris. I'm here with Kindi Gill and Neerava Nash. And what we're going to talk about today is depression, which is pretty prevalent and a huge topic that so many people are dealing with.
Yeah, I thought it was very relevant for us to discuss that today. We've seen two tragic sort of incidents during this week of that have committed suicide. I mean, I'm sure there's more examples like that, but celebrities that were talked about this week. And it seems appropriate to actually maybe discuss our own journey through depression too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I know I've had a lot of depression in the past years. I don't really deal with it very much these days. I'm really lucky that way, doing this inner work. But for, about 30 years, from a very, very early age, I was feeling a lot of depression and have dealt with depressive episodes. One lasted as long as, it was about 6 months that I was in that. It was really heavy, really dark. Yeah, it's a hard thing to deal with. Yeah.
And were you on medication for that at the time, Leela, or were you?
I was on medications for ADHD that helped my mood, but there were times when I got on antidepressants to help with, it was kind of a back and forth through the different medications. But yeah, I've been on antidepressants before too.
And what would they do for you? What would the antidepressants actually achieve?
I had a hard time with the antidepressants because they had side effects, and sometimes I would feel better in one way, but I would feel worse. Like my mood would be better, but then I would have maybe more anxiety, or my concentration wouldn't be good because I was dealing with concentration problems at the time. So it was always difficult to juggle medications and being on multiple medications for these different things.
I remember seeing a client of mine one time, and it was very clear that the state was really foggy, and like he just basically put that down to the medication, that he'd been on it for 2.5 years, and therefore he just sort of accepted that his ability to process wasn't as fast anymore. But as we worked with him with the Dalian Method across several weeks, it was interesting that the first thing that I saw from the outer perspective that changed was that the fogginess had lifted. And then the second thing that I noticed was that some of the like almost like slurring of the words, like a slowing of the words, that also then changed as well.
Nice. So be and focus better and more of a clear mind.
It started to naturally happen, and he hadn't come off the medication.
Oh, okay.
Whilst he was working with the fear and the very, very severe anxiety that was behind the depression, as he was clearing that and transforming it, his cognitive state was getting stronger, even though the medication was still happening in the background. So that was really sweet for me to watch, because I could see that the power of consciousness, which is what we're using with the Dalian Method to help heal, actually breaks through that web that is created by medication too, because the power of consciousness can obviously just break through anything. So for me, it was a really, really nice thing to watch. My own experience of depression didn't result in me taking medication. I've had a phobia against medication for like all of my life, really. But I fell into depression when I first moved to Canada, which was in 2006. And so I started to get the symptoms in the early part of 2007. And it was very difficult to motivate myself for anything, really, even the simplest of tasks. I couldn't really find the encouragement to get out of bed. And because I'm such an overachiever, it was a huge shock to my psyche to see myself in that state where I didn't really want to meet with people. I didn't want to be outside of the house. I didn't want to be in conversation. And hours would race by, and it would look like minutes to me. where I was deeply buried in these thoughts that were like a prison. I don't know how anybody else. Have you faced depression at all, Neerava?
Well, you know, probably in my high school years and times in my 20s. I got married very young. And I do remember times where I don't think the word depression was used back then. Like it wasn't the same, or I wasn't aware of it. But if I look back at my life, I can see that, you know, yeah, likely I was depressed at that time. Mm-hmm. But for when I really look at it, I see that those times that where I was depressed was a time of something wanting to change in my life. And then something broke free and something really shifted. And the time that for sure I know I was depressed, I wouldn't have called it that at the time perhaps, but in 1998 when I moved to BC from Calgary, and I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, that winter I know I was depressed because I had spent, you know, those years focusing on being a mom and then moving, you know, and making the house just right. I always was, you know, painting walls, repainting walls, doing something to kind of move my creative energy. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what I was trying to do. I would draw house plans in fine details till 4 a.m. just so that something was flowing. And that winter, 98, 99, I know I was depressed. We were renovating, but yet there was something missing. Mm. And I was sleeping, like I'd get the kids off to school and then trying to just get something done. And all I wanted to do was just lay on the couch. Mm. Carly was in preschool, so there wasn't a lot of time without the kids, but I remember feeling very sluggish. Mm. And like just empty, kind of lost. What am I doing? And that feeling is, I know that feeling is what sparked me on my whole spiritual journey. Not that it hadn't been before that, because I've always been, but something really shifted. And I was looking at gardening books in March of 99, and there was a book placed in the wrong place. It was called The Path to Love by Deepak Chopra. Mm-hmm. And I remember having this feeling like I had read one of his books in my 20s, Ageless Body, Timeless Mind. And that always intrigued me. But that book is what started everything for me. And that depression is what led me to, like, you know, look at the book. I know it for sure.
Yeah, that's how I see it as a very important topic. The fact that we can get sick and we can become depressed, but sometimes we don't understand that it's actually the key catalyst that moves us on in the direction that's really, really going to serve us. Because that's for sure exactly what happened to me. Because if I hadn't been depressed, I wouldn't have been reading all the self-help books. Yeah. And if I hadn't got exhausted with all the variety of self-help books that I had actually got through across sort of almost like a 1.5 year period, then eventually In Search of the Miraculous wouldn't have fallen off of a shelf and intrigued my interest for me to bring it home, and hence the journey with the Dalian Method. And categorically, that very first session that I had with Madda back on 10th of October 2008, I went in depressed, ready to check out of life, not wanting to be here, feeling very, very weighed down in loneliness and the meaninglessness of life and the destruction that goes on. And the sensitivity of all that pain was driving me down, sort of like, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here. But when I came out of the session, I remember thinking, where's that cloud? Like that heavy, heavy cloud that was always permanently on the top of my head. And I felt that yucky feeling in my tummy, like, where is it? Uh-huh. And so I knew something miraculous had happened, but I hadn't understood that something so deeply painful and so profoundly affecting us physically could be lifted as readily as it was on that day.
Mhm.
I don't know. For me, it was a very big, like, whoa, this is what I was feeling. This is now not my state. I don't know why it's not my state. I hadn't understood consciousness at that point, but I do know that I feel radically different. And to be disentangled from what my mind was saying was just amazing.
Mhm. Yeah. I think, the heaviness is what I remember most about those depressive periods, just that, and just the kind of, one of you guys mentioned getting out of bed, Neerava, I think, like just getting out of bed.
Mm.
And I think I was having a low level depression basically all the time. I look back now because I'm so different and I realize, wow, everything was really hard for me. And then I would have really, really dark periods. But just daily life was difficult for me and I didn't have a lot of motivation. It was kind of like, why am I here? It's hard. Life is hard. You got to do all these things. And then what's the point? That was kind of how I felt. And then I would get into these deep, dark depressions where it was very painful. But as you guys were talking, I was also thinking about, what causes this depression that we go through. And it's different for all of us. But I know I had a client recently and it reminded me of me in my past where there was no connection to her own intuition, no connection to what does she feel, what does she think, even though she had a lot of emotions coming up, sadness and fear and anxiety and these kinds of things. But there was no, like, I don't know what I want. She was so used to listening to everybody else's opinion and pleasing everyone around her. That's just how she's been functioning. And she's been dealing with depression. And that gave me insight about my own life, about how I was living in that state. And then I realized, oh, no wonder I was depressed. It was just, being so, for me, it was just the insecurity of giving my power away to everyone around me. What does this person think? What does this person expect? What it makes them happy? And that was just drove me. I didn't know anything else. I didn't have any connection to myself beyond that. And I didn't have any taste of freedom outside of that because that was so important to me. I could, at the time I couldn't imagine doing something and not caring that someone is disappointed or having their own feelings about it. Not that I don't care now. I have a healthy perspective on what to do with those things. But yeah, and that gave me insight for one of the causes of, of course I wasn't happy. Of course I was depressed a lot. I wasn't even living my own life. I wasn't doing anything I enjoyed. I didn't have a connection to that aspect of myself. And I didn't feel any natural joy because of all the heaviness that I was carrying.
Mm.
Just being alive, that feeling of I'm here, I'm alive, and I feel good. That was foreign to me.
But most of that sounds like because you were trying to fit in to other people somehow validating you or approving of you or making you feel better. My disillusionment and my depression really started with like the bubble bursting on the so-called American dream, like, where we get given this idea that if we pursue and we succeed and we accumulate money, or we've got all the things around us that are going to keep us comfortable, and we've got that typical, like we've got that home and the family. So like for me, it was all really about the intelligence kicking in to say, oh, this isn't cracked out to be what people give you the impression that it's cracked out to be. And the intelligence kicking in around, so life seems to have destructive things that happen, because my sister had gone through a car accident. So I couldn't see the meaning of why something so grave would leave her paralyzed. Like, what is the point of that happening to a person? And then I'd also seen the end of my own business life as well. So like 20 plus years of creativity that just basically end up in dumpster bins. So that made no sense. And then on top of that, coming to a new country where I'd left my family behind, my friends behind, my old identity behind. And in this new country, my relationship was fast falling apart. We'd been married for 20 plus years, and my motivation around the children was disappearing. So everything began to feel meaningless. And my intelligence was saying, so what's the point? What's the point of this then? What's the point of getting older and older for there to be more and more adverse circumstances for you to face? And was that thing about success and money and achievement one big lie? Because it's not it's not fulfilling. Actually, the word is fulfilling. There was something that I recognized that said, I don't feel fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that started the process of like self-exploration and trying to actually I didn't know consciously that I had got so sick and I'd got depressed so that I would end up asking deeper questions. It was all part of the heaviness of life that was sort of shutting me off from life. And I can see very clearly how when you're being shut off from life, that there can be a point that you get to where wanting to be in life doesn't seem worth it anymore. Mm-hmm. Like the drudgery of it and the hard work of it. But I guess really the most painful part of all of that was the upset in my marriage. That was the most grueling aspect that was really shutting me down.
Yeah, when you use the word disillusionment, that really describes, that's a huge disillusionment, all those things together at once. You know?
Yeah. Everything that you thought you were here for on the planet, none of it made any sense at that point. Because I was asking questions like, okay, so what's the point of being married then if you have to have a divorce? So what's the point of having a family structure if you've got to be peeled away from it? And then I started to think about the death point, like what's the point of the fact that we all then die? Like all these questions were being asked, but really underneath it all, I was terrified to be alone. Absolutely and utterly, excruciatingly terrified to be alone.
But you know, I remember it. I think I was like 6 years old, and I was thinking, what's the point? We're all going to die. I remember feeling that, and it was a very heavy, morose. Like even as a child, it's like now I'm like much more. I'm like this enthusiastic, happy person. Not all the time, but I just feel like when I compare, when I was a child, I was so like morose. I was like an old person in a little child's body that's like, I don't like it here. And I remember not feeling good at a very early age. Like, why? You know, why do people, I would see people and they're busy doing things. Why is everyone doing all these things? Like, where do they think, do they know something I don't? They're going to work and they seem like they're wanting to do these things, but what's the point? It's like,
Like, what's the point? Because we're all going to die.
That was I remember thinking that we're all going to die. It felt like sad and heavy. I didn't really feel the enthusiasm for life and doing things and going to school.
I had more of the warrior instinct. There's this mess in this world. People don't accept me. I'm the wrong color. I experience hardship. But I can combat this, and I can prove that I'm more than this. So females don't do certain things men do. So now I'm going to prove that females can. So there was a real warrior instinct that said,
oh, that kind of warrior. Okay.
If there's a barrier, I'm going to cut through that barrier and show that it's possible. Right? Which I guess is why the disillusionment was so strong, because it showed that it's all possible was empty. Like it still leaves you empty-handed.
But that warrior you have that strength inside of you to be that warrior. So it's coming in handy, right? It's just that you couldn't resolve those things by going out and proving it. You realized, not all of it. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't have known that there's such a thing as going inwards. I wouldn't have known that, like at a basic level, we're not taught that pain arises on this planet in whatever form it comes, and if it comes in the form of depression, it arises because it's designed to provoke you to explore more about yourself. That suffering isn't supposed to be the end point. It's in fact the beginning point of a new journey that's possible. At its basic level, we're not given that education. If you look at a lot of adults around us, or the generations ahead of us, progressively people look more and more miserable and they slow down. But how many people do you have as like beacons of light showing you that, yes, these things, these destructive things have meaning to them?
You know, Kindi, as you're saying that, what I'm noticing, what's arising for me is something I notice in society now. There's a lot of education around depression. There's a lot of stuff about it on social media, right? But what I see happening is this sort of demand by people to make depression acceptable. Like, it's okay that we're depressed. And then sort of saying, you know, and it's okay to be on medication.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm depressed and I'm using medication and it's okay. And sort of like, okay, this is who I am. It's acceptance. And if you don't accept me this way, then, you know, smarten up. That's kind of the message out there, right? Like, would you agree that there's this?
Yeah. I mean, some of it is like with a real purity of heart that says we don't want stigma around these topics.
Yeah. And that's important.
Yeah. Because we want that. There's a heart that says, look, we're human, and as human beings we suffer from all sorts of things, so let's not say this person is therefore less than or not equal or whatever if they're having issues. So there's a lovely heart that wants the conversation on the table, but some of it is about staying stuck too.
Yeah, there's both sides. There's the energy of being able to speak up and say what's really going on, because that's something that is changing, especially for women, right? That to be able to speak up and say, you know, I'm depressed, I have anxiety, all these things. People, well-known people in the public eye are now coming up and, you know, telling us what's really going on. But I also feel this energy of like stuckness there, that this is who I am, and I just want to, you know, somehow help the conversation to keep going, where we can help people recognize what we're saying here is that it's happening for a reason. You know, like when I'm with people who are on medication, being empathic, I'm not sure what your experience is. I know we're all empathic to, it's a human trait that we can all have. It's something that's very open in me. But when I'm with people who are on medication, there's a flatness that I feel like I can't feel them. Does that make sense? There's this energy of something's not there. I don't know how to connect with them in the same way.
Well, I was on medications for so long, and I felt that I'm cut off from myself. Like there was something, even when I felt good because I wasn't in pain, I could manage my life and things like this and my emotions and my thought process. But there was a feeling that it's like I'm missing something. I can't access myself. Yeah. So when you said flat, I felt that. Yeah. I remembered that I felt that inside myself. Yeah.
Which makes sense, because what you're experiencing on the outside then, Neerava, has to be a match to what the person is feeling on the inside.
Right.
Which is what depression really is. So depression, like going back to this warrior approach, just because I was raised in a way where women were given more, were sort of designed to be suppressed, and men had a more sort of a higher role in society. Combating that on the outside by saying I can prove I'm an equal wasn't solving that inside me was a belief that said that men and women are not equal. The minute that was solved inside me, and my ability to understand, well, so the imprint that came from generations prior to me was dissolved inside me. That's the moment at which the true freedom or the true liberation arose. So if you're taking what you're saying, you felt flat inside, Leela. So somebody outside of you is going to experience you maybe in that same flat way, because that is your state inside. But the more we get connected with what's causing us to be depressed, and the more we get to unravel and disentangle why that depression is there, the greater our liberation. It's just
Absolutely.
yeah. That and that's the purpose of the depression, to help us to actually become comfortable in our own skins, and be able to understand the aspects of us that get us down. Like when I heard about Kate Spade's death, like I was really moved by that, because I could relate to this successful outer confident persona that she would have been carrying to have created that giant organization like she did. And yet I could relate to the vulnerability of the woman inside that body that, you know, maybe couldn't process how to deal with criticism, or maybe couldn't process the load or the responsibility she was carrying, or even like the fact that you are strong. That becomes a death trap in itself.
Yeah.
Because you can't then be weak, because you're the strong one. So then loads of people come to you for help, but you're the one responsible for others and become the carer, but nobody's there for you, and you haven't been given the education that actually in the end you have to be there for you.
So, and as you're saying that, Kindi, what I'm recognizing is these labels that are put on us from the world end up being a real weight, don't they?
Massive.
And a trap, and a huge.
Massive. Yeah. And it's little things like, for example, I put a post up on Facebook yesterday about some of the dysfunction that you can get in a family home, particularly husband and wife, because I've had lots of difficulty with my husband. But how many of us are willing to discuss that in a way that we get to understand what the deeper lessons behind all of that is? Yeah. Like ultimately, school of life, with everything that it throws at us, the school of life is only about learning lessons. But what is the biggest lesson we're learning? Like, what is the ultimate lesson we're all learning?
I did it's so important to have these discussions and to talk openly with people. And I did a presentation yesterday for a school, and it was a room full of moms of or elementary school kids. And I asked the question, you know, so what are some of the struggles you have with your children, you know, day-to-day life? And nobody wanted to talk about it.
They didn't want to talk. They don't want to reveal it.
Yeah. And how often do moms feel like they're, you know, they judge themselves, or they feel a lot of guilt? They carry that. Yeah. I'm a bad mom. I'm a horrible mom. I've had clients deal with that self-judgment, because they're going through their own struggles and they feel like they're not meeting these expectations as a parent. And
but that's the trap, you see. Like, it's about the expectations. So at its basic level, women for years and years and years have been suppressed for generations upon generations. And so when you talk to women, typically, like if you really get into an intimate conversation, you'll get to start hearing that I don't feel like I'm enough. It doesn't matter what you've achieved or what you've attained or what you've accomplished, your own head is seeing I'm not enough. But the thing is, most of us then don't know that these are ancestral imprints that have been coming down the line, that are in your cellular structure, that are driving that conversation. Because forever women have not been enough in society.
Yeah.
And so our mothers and our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers have transferred that into our genetics, and it's our responsibility to disentangle ourselves from that belief system so that we can be enough without having earned money, say. Like, you know, for home keepers, they're not earning money, and somehow there's these expectations that they should be super women that are capable of running the home and nowadays having to work as well, equal to their partner. And on top of that, like it's like and now, right?
It's impossible. The bar is so high. It's absolutely impossible.
Yes.
It keeps the ego in that loop of I'm not enough, I'm not enough, I'm not enough.
That's right. So what are these expectations and why are they there in the first place? And why are we striving to attempt to meet them?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're being taken further away from ourselves every moment.
When really what we're looking for is inside. That's why we feel not enough, because we're not connected to
our
inside. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If we had the education to know that there's a space inside, and that space is full of everything that you're ever going to be needing, and there's no shortage of it at all for any person, this concept of I'm not enough would just not, we would all laugh at it. Yeah. But because society is created under the model of scarcity, and then because apparently there's a shortage, we've then got to try and grab it from somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, therein lies the trap.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a question for both of you. Looking back, and so we've already brought up the women's suppression, and we're talking about depression. Did you feel small in your life, early in your life? That feeling of I'm small.
I felt like I wasn't enough.
That was what it felt like. Okay.
And I was a stay-at-home mom, basically until my husband and I separated. So when they went into school, so all those years, 7 years of being at home with kids, I was just with my girls. And yeah, there was always a sense of, oh, you've got it easy. You don't have to do much. You just get to stay home. That message was there already, even though it was 25 years ago.
Okay.
Girls are turning 23 and 25. But yeah, it was definitely there.
And then we're talking about women here, Leela, but I a couple of days ago, in fact, on the day that Kate Spade died, I was talking to my son, and I said, honey, I can so relate to this sort of successful woman that has to hold it all together, but inside all that vulnerability. And I just wish I could be a helping hand for more successful women. And he goes, Mom, it's not just women, it's men too, right? And he said there's a lot of successful guys that are also trapped. But they're trapped under different things. It might not be the feeling of that they're not enough, but it might be about they can't do enough. They can't provide enough. So it might be still around enoughness, but in a different way, because so much load is put on men to be the provider and the supporter in the old ancestral system, that even though there might be a wife or assisting you and sharing the load with you, again, you're programmed with, am I doing enough?
Yeah.
Am I carrying enough? Am I resilient enough? Am I strong enough? Am I macho enough? Like, there's so many things that they're programmed with.
Yeah.
And can you imagine with the masculine programming, imagine going through depression as a man. That's hard, And yeah, and I had a client recently, and he was dealing with actually a lot of I'm not enough and a lot of inferiority.
Yeah.
And I'm not smart enough, all these things. And he was a successful person. It wasn't any outward proof of that. But then he went from feeling, and he didn't realize this till after the session, he felt so big. He felt his power. He felt his presence. And he felt like, you know, wherever I go, that's my territory, you know, and his energy completely changed, and all that stuff that he was thinking that the mind was saying, he saw it was not true. Like, I'm not enough, and I'm not good at this, and this person's better than me. And when he felt that sense of expansion and, you know, I'm in my territory, and there was a lot of love in that I'm in my territory, in that presence, in that masculine presence, it's his true nature that his mind was just programmed, you know, not good enough from childhood, all these things that handed down to him. But then I've been thinking about, I feel connected to that. You know, I walk into a room and I feel like I belong there. Anywhere I go, I don't care, you know, it's like, here I am, like, this is my world. But looking back, I never felt that. I always felt like small. Like when I was at home, I could feel like I could relax here at home. But then I would go to someone's house or go out to work or just be out in the world. And I kind of felt small and keeping, you know, it's like that fear and that insecurity, and it was almost like I didn't really feel that I should be allowed to be here. Like I kind of felt guilty for existing or even breathing, taking up space. I didn't feel like, and that never occurs to me now, like feeling guilty for breathing, for just existing. What? But and it's very painful to feel that. And it took me years before one day I'm like, oh my God, I feel guilty for breathing and taking up space. I felt this my whole life. And then it took years until I started working with DM and this work that it went. But yeah.
And that's the other thing, is the speed at which these things can be disentangled, even though we might carry them for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Because in the same conversation with my son, he was saying that the statistics are that under 50, the greatest number of deaths for men is from suicide.
Really? Wow.
Which I did not know.
I didn't know that either.
And I haven't looked it up because it was a conversation he was having with me. And it might be something that he's seen in one of his psychology classes.
Yeah.
But as you were saying, what you were saying there, I was wondering, like, that competitive spirit, because guys are taught to be competitive, and then women that have more of masculine traits in them also learn how to be competitive, because I certainly was in that category. So I'm not talking about a man as such, I'm just talking about that trait, right? It can be females too. That competitive spirit is constantly forcing you to compare your achievements or your attainments against somebody else. Look what's happening in a school. Like yesterday or the day before, they were all being given prizes for the best in English or the best in math. And my daughter said, oh, you know, have you received an email, like anything around me? But the fact that everybody has to watch one person be celebrated.
Yeah.
It's such a shame, because why are we celebrating one person rather than all of them? Because they've come with their unique gifts, and without those individual gifts, they couldn't even be together.
Yeah.
But yet so much of society is structured for us to compete, and then we applaud and celebrate the one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So damaging. So there's so many reasons for why we will get depressed, because we don't even know this is happening to us. It's being done to us.
Yeah.
We're just living in society, and we're not picking up that, this system is designed to crush me so that I don't feel like enough. Or this system is designed to crush me so that, again, I don't feel like I'm enough, and the authority always wins.
Mm-hmm.
But why is the authority always the one outside of us? Why aren't we the authority of our lives?
I think that's especially important for the younger people who are going through depression and emotional upheaval. I remember I thought it was biological. You know, my brain is wired weird. Of course, that pushed, me to do the medication, and it took me a long time to realize everything does have a reason. You're not just depressed because you're broken or you're missing something biologically. There is a reason. And you alluded to this earlier. Actually, you did more than allude. You explained it really well. And that there's something deep inside of us that's not being lived, a deeper potential, a deeper ability that we're supposed to be here on this planet to do. And it's actually good that we get depressed that we're not living it and we're just living what the world taught us to live. Because otherwise we wouldn't be pushed to find that deeper meaning for why we're here. Why are we alive? Like, what is this all about?
And why do we have suffering?
Exactly.
And is it the end? Is it the end spot, or is it actually the beginning to a new life? And how medication can seem like the crutch that we've got to hold on to, but it also keeps us trapped. Like, you know, how many of us are ever shown that these things that we rely on so heavily are not there to serve us? Because we need doctors. Doctors need us for us to be sick. And then by giving medication to us, that doesn't actually make us unsick. It just keeps us stuck where we were.
Yeah, and maybe it keeps us in a place until the soul is ready to do the work. Like, maybe, you know, I still trust it's serving a purpose on some level, right? Like, we've seen a lot of people that have come to the Dalian Method that are on medication for depression, and it's not that they just drop it cold turkey. There's a process of coming off it slowly as they work on themselves. Some very quickly, some faster than others. But maybe it's just serving a purpose until so that they can manage life. That's right. Until there's a readiness inside, or that tipping point has come where they can really start to look. Because it does take courage, right, to do this work.
It does.
It takes courage.
But the point is that it isn't the cure.
Right.
It's like a resting place.
Yeah.
It's like a resting place for you to be ready.
Yeah.
To climb up a new mountain.
Yeah, if that could be the education out there, that, you know, depression, medication is a resting place until you're ready to go deeper. Wouldn't that be it?
It can help people. I understand deep suffering. Well, you'll do anything to stop it, right? And then it does get dangerous when we're talking about suicide, when we're talking about, you know, dangerous tendencies, right? So, you know, to get out of the urgency is important. So whatever it takes to get out of it. And then you take it a step at a time, and then you go and work with it, right? And so I think that's why medication does have its place, to make sure that we don't do anything to harm ourselves, to harm anyone else in those intense moments where things have gotten really bad. But yeah, and then we want to start working with the root causes of what got us there.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, Leela, because with that sense of urgency that's there, because I can't speak from that place, because I haven't experienced that type of sense of urgency in the symptoms I've experienced, but you have. So you're able to say, look, this is really important, that if you're in a dangerous situation, these things are needed and they're necessary to stabilize.
Yeah, don't be a hero, like, you know, like push yourself to those edges necessarily, but yeah.
But the only point we're making is that's not the end then.
Yeah.
The trajectory that you can move up and beyond. And if you stay just in the zone of I'm on medication and I'm stable, you're missing out on what else is still possible, which seems a little bit odd for me speaking, because I'm saying, like, I was disillusioned by the more, the have more, that type of thing. But the more that I'm talking about here is the more of being able to be comfortable with everything that's arising inside you, right? It's not about being more for anybody outside of you, or for you to get accolades outside of you, or for you to be given big awards. It's not about that more. It's about the being more inside of you. Mm-hmm. I just want to clarify that, otherwise there's a danger. I'm going to be seeing people up a mountain to go and do something new. Really, the bottom line is all we're achieving is becoming happy to be ourselves. In the skins we're in, with the attributes we have, with the tendencies that we have, and we enjoy the glory of who we are, and we get to enjoy the glory of who we are more with other people too, if we want to. But if we don't, we can keep it to ourselves too.
Yeah, I think that's such an amazing byproduct of doing this work with the Dalian Method, being able to be okay with who we are, be authentic in our connections with our friends, right? And be able to talk about those dark shadows, those places where we're stuck, and recognize, it's just something that hasn't been worked through yet. It's not who we are ultimately. It's just another, part
an experience that we've come.
Yeah, more lessons to learn. Like it's always about, it's such a cliche, but it's so true. It's about the journey.
Yeah.
It's about the journey, about being able to just watch what's arising. And that is just such a beautiful gift of doing this work, to be okay as we are in this moment.
Yeah. And that we're not a victim to what life is giving us, because ultimately, like, for example, I know that I was at the root of it all terrified of not having security, terrified of being alone, and actually almost terrified to put myself on the agenda and the priority list. At times, I was not capable of putting myself ahead of other people. So
I'm here and I exist. It's coming to that place. Yeah. Like,
so then as I've unraveled this, I've become more comfortable to be alone. As I've unraveled my I won't call it psychotic state, but that state inside, I've become more capable of saying no when I need to say no, and do what's right for me without expecting other people to love me. I've become more capable of loving myself. And I'm not sort of so knee deep in pain when it doesn't arise from outside. So the part that was attaching me to the world outside, that's beginning to fall away as I get more put together inside. And what better feeling to be able to be alone and to love yourself and to think that there's nothing wrong with yourself the way you are. What better feeling than that you can take to bed?
But also, the outer life starts to change as you change the inner. Because you mentioned the lessons we're learning through these experiences. So life changes to help us learn the next thing. And you'd be surprised how so many things can open up just by shifting ourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, this is not as if it's not result-based.
Yeah, there's definitely an outer manifestation of the inner work. That's what I've seen. And sometimes it takes a while to get there. But yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's miraculous things that begin to happen for you outside of your life. But that ought not to be your motivation.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's almost like the byproduct of doing what needs to be done to sort of patch yourself back up again and not feel so insecure about being in your own skin.
Yeah.
But that security thing is such a big topic, because the need to have security on this planet, especially when it's driven by money, is another very, very deeply intense trap. Without the money, we can't survive. But with the fear of the fact that we must stay secure, so much is not possible.
Money and self-worth, your worth as a human being.
Yeah.
Our next topic for our next.
Yeah, maybe that's what we should do. So is there anything else, Leela, that we should be saying about depression?
Well, have you guys found there is a natural wave to life? I notice, there's my ups, and then there's like, I don't even know if I would call them downs. It's just like it's supposed to kind of go up and down a little bit, and we're supposed to have challenge and enjoyment. And it doesn't feel, it's not something I would call depression, but there is the wave that comes. Do you guys notice that? Because that, and you can kind of accept that. You don't have to be necessarily always on that top, happy feeling necessarily. Do you find that the up and down, there's a meaning to that in what it does for us?
Well, there's two things. One is, if we were up all the time, I think it would be exhausting to stay there. So we do need some rest time again. It's a bit like the rest that we were talking about earlier. And also, when we have the wave coming back down again, it helps us to re-enjoy the up. Because if we were in the up all the time, we would take it for granted and we wouldn't be able to enjoy it consistently. So that, to me, it feels like there's a purpose. We're here, then we dip down, we sort of get a chance to rest and then experience something new. And then as we rise up again, then this ecstasy seems as brilliant as it was over there. But moment to moment, it's always going to keep shifting, because otherwise, how are we going to grow? If ultimately all that is happening is that we're learning and we stayed stagnant in one spot, our learning would stop.
And the more still times, that's how I experience them. They're the time when I look more inside. Yeah, the inward times. And I think if I wasn't comfortable with that, then those times would be more challenging. But I enjoy those down times because it is a chance for me to go inside and be more quiet and to reflect and work through things. And then there's the up, where there's lots of energy and it's ecstatic and passionate and all those things. And yeah.
But if the wave is doing this now, say, I can categorically say that when I was depressed, the wave was down here. Like the dip of it was really low, and the climb up, like there was a big climb that had to come out of it. And now the waves are doing this, but they're sort of kinder. Whereas before, the depth of despair in that depressed state did look like it was a pit that was hard to come out of. In that moment, whilst I was in it, it did look like this is never going to come to an end. So I guess that saying that we have from the mystics of this too shall pass is very useful if you happen to be in that trough right now. And hopefully some of our conversation will help people to recognize that you can come out of it. Not only will this too shall pass, we're also revealing that the Dalian Method is a miraculous tool to help you come out of it in a permanent way. Because I haven't gone back into that quality of depression since I found the Dalian Method. And I guess you're the best person to speak about that, really. When I'm saying the changes arise in a permanent way, you're not finding that you're going back to anything like those early days where you said most of it was lived in a depressed state.
Yeah, no, I don't. I see things totally different now. I can't, that's why when I have sometimes when I have a client or something happens and then I remember, wow, I remember feeling that. I remember that's how I lived too. And yeah, sometimes I forget because I've adjusted to this new place of being happy to be alive, loving myself, and going through the wave, but I know that it's all worthy, as before. And for me, that feeling of small versus big is the best way I can describe it in this moment. It's like small, helpless, not able to think for myself. And I know yours was different, Kindi, because you were definitely self-driven. But yeah, and not needing medication, not needing pills, not needing to drink, not needing to smoke marijuana, not needing to take party pills, not needing to even go out to a party because I can hang out with my friend and we can goof off and have so much fun without taking anything, without needing like those kind of things.
I've spent a lot of time with you. You're a lot of fun.
I know, who needs drugs, right?
Yeah. But the thing, you're such a beautiful testament to this work, Leela, because you live alone and you have for a long time. And, you've really been able to work through these things and haven't had all of the distractions that Kindi and I have had with having families and busier lives in that way. So I really commend you for taking this journey, because it's been a you had to access that warrior inside to do it, for sure.
Yeah. Well, you guys too. You've used the family challenge to work through all that. So, yeah.
But so the main thing really here is like in terms of the idea that, you know, I get depressed and it's always going to be my reset point and I'm always going to go there. That's just a myth, because it can be healed categorically and irrevocably, and you don't have to go back to those deep, deep troughs. But minds also have a certain tendency. So some minds are more optimistic and some minds are more pessimistic. And so and also intelligence too, because if you aren't sensitive to what's happening in the world, many chronic things that are happening person to person may not affect you the same way. But another person could be really badly affected and get very depressed because they see the deeper meaning of what's really happening in life and the amount of destruction that goes on. So if you have a pessimistic attitude, yes, maybe you're going to go into that negative phase more readily, but at least with the Dalian method, you know how to come out and see the lesson of it. And eventually you can get to the point where you can start seeing your pessimism from a distance, and you don't have to be the pessimism. And certainly with the intelligence side, the more sensitive you are to the world, look at it as a perspective of, yes, I am getting depressed, but equally so, I have a massive opportunity to awaken out of this into something that's much more liberating, because the person who's not feeling that push or that pressure isn't going to actually get to come to that type of awakening either. Yeah.
I would say that's kind of the perspective that I've come from. My willingness to now be in my body and feel the world, I can manage that now because of the Dalian method. What caused me a lot of the heavy times, the most painful times, was feeling the world, feeling the pain and suffering around me, and that was really. It still is intense at times, but now I have a center to rest in.
It doesn't mean to say you're not feeling it, because it still happens, right?
Yes,
I mean, I'll watch certain things
now, though. It's not overwhelming.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the way I dealt with it in my younger years, looking back, was to be disconnected from my body. Because if we're not in our body, we don't feel the world. We're just a head walking around.
Yeah.
So, you know, going in was very uncomfortable, and feeling other people's suffering was very uncomfortable. I didn't know how to deal with it at all. But now I can be there and I can feel intense pain. And I've been around a lot of it in the last 2 years. And yeah, it's totally manageable. It doesn't mean I don't feel it, but there's that space inside where I can rest while it's happening. And that's an amazing gift of working with the Dalian method. That's what it's given me.
Yeah, and you know, it's different, right? Because you're not taking it on. No. Even though you're feeling it, it's like you know it's not necessarily your responsibility. You don't feel like you have to fix it or figure it out. So much of where that was a burden isn't really a burden anymore. It's just like, okay, I can feel this.
Yeah.
It doesn't, yeah.
You just end up with more compassionate understanding of what it represents and how it's being created by the ego, and how it also, that feeling also is a temporary place that a person stays in too.
Yeah.
You're not judging any of it. You're not dismissing anybody. You're not alienating them or making them feel small for the fact that they're having that experience. Which brings me to like the last thing that I would actually like to say about this topic is that ultimately the Dalian method helps you to unite with the world. So it's not surprising that if somebody's feeling pain outside of you, Neerava, that you're experiencing it in your body, because we are all united. Like all of our difficulties are happening because we think you're the other and you're the other and he's the other, when in truth, what we're learning through the Dalian method is to see that everything that we're experiencing, another will experience in a similar way. And that helps us, because the more we get to feel what we're feeling, the more our heart opens and our compassionate understanding for everybody around us stays not only intact, but it's the key thing that's alive, that's driving the quality of the words that come out of our mouth.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
Thanks, Kindi.
My pleasure. Are we at the end of this?
Yeah. Anything else? Neerava, do you want to add anything?
Well, I'm just thinking about, you know, a young person, teen or a young adult that's listening to this and maybe is super sensitive, because I'm just coming from my perspective, has a hard time, you know, dealing with life, maybe is on medication, just to know that, you know, that there is a way out of that. There is a way, there is a journey to come into. That's been my journey, is to come into my body and find a safe place inside, despite the pain and suffering around in the world. And then being able to deal with my own pain and suffering, because everything's a mirror, right? Everything is. So just to know that there is a way, and maybe you know, maybe you're in a pit of despair right now, but that, you know, if there's willingness inside to make a shift, it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that it's possible to experience pleasure and happiness and all the good things that we don't see possible when we're in that dark space, or when we feel like the world is in that dark space and there's no good.
Yeah.
That passes. That's not the end, for sure. I can tell you from my experience.
Something else that's just come up is that ability to feel the deepest, darkest places inside also give you the opportunity to, you know, feel just as much at the other end of the spectrum, right? So if we're not willing to go into those places, we can't soar.
Yeah.
So that's what I enjoy, the ability to feel both. And I know that is part of being a human, right? They're both part of our experience of life, and both are beautiful in a different way, right?
Yeah, the darkest parts take us to the brightest parts, for sure.
Yeah.
But when you said that phrase, that if there's a willingness, there's a tool out there for those that don't feel willing, I want to leave this message too, that's okay too. Because there's a timing for every single person, and that timing only you will ever know. So do not go into judgment over the fact that you're not willing, because that self-judgment will actually make the depression worse. Just rest in what is happening to you and wait until that willingness begins to surface naturally, and do not crucify or condemn yourself in the meantime.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kindi, because when we're working with DM, we always have to start with where we are. So even to recognize at times where, you know, I'm not willing to come to that acceptance that that's where I am in a moment about whatever it is that I'm dealing with, that it has to start there.
That's right.
Yeah, and let's leave it with that. Absolute acceptance of where you are is the foundation from where everything happens. So we need to start there. Yeah, beautifully said.
Yeah, and that the Dalian method can start at that point.
Yes.
So if there's no willingness to come out of where you're actually at, but at least you're resonating with that this tool begins with where you're at. If hearing that is enough, then just investing in the tool to deal with where you're at will be a brilliant start.
Good point. Yeah. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.